There's a story broke today, and it was a bit of a something and nothing really, but it was a little bit of a weird one. Um, I mean, it looked. I'm not gonna play the video, but it kind of looked a little bit funny for those of you that maybe happen to have come across this particular incident. But it involves the uh, president of France and his wife. Apparently, the video shows a bit of a kind of little shove in the face. Um, and then the president kind of comically looking a little bit startled before kind of waving and then just skedaddling around the corner. And I mean, it's been played down as the days went on as being something of a bit of play fighting, I think, between the president and his wife. But it was this part at the start of the day whenever the story broke. The as Sky report here, the Elise initially denied the authenticity of the images that were being widely distributed. And it wasn't just images; it was a video. It was quite a clear video. You could tell who was in the video, and that what the action that had transpired. So look, the Elysee initially denied the authenticity of the images of the interaction before eventually verifying they were real. And this is, I mean, why? This is the question I've got. I mean, why initially would they just? Because there was reports earlier where they basically, I don't think they used the words fake news, but it wasn't. It was along those lines. This what I've highlighted there for you off Sky News is a little bit of a less kind of aggressive or assertive kind of determination that they gave earlier in the day. It was closer to, yeah, that didn't happen. That's just fake news, or that's just AI made up. They didn't say these things, but it was pushing. It was closer to that, and I was sitting thinking, well, no, I mean, that's just not true. That's just bollocks. And why can't you just say no comment or we'll release information later in the day? And why do you have to say that it's just not real? To then go back and well retract what you said, which clearly wasn't the truth anyway, and now come out with something that may or may not be real in that. It was being played down and being seen as something as a bit of like a, I don't know, play fighting or whatever between a husband and a wife. I don't really know what kind of explanation they're specifically given, but either way, why the bullshit to start with is kind of the question I'm asking. And ultimately it doesn't offer for the credibility, and by their credibility I do mean in this incident the president of France and his wife, but generally speaking, big corporations or social elites often will say these things to try and downplay, and they're quite weak attempts. They're quite watery, and they don't often work, especially in the era of social media. That's been stretching some, let's say 20, 25 years now. They should know better than to kind of we on us and tell us that it's raining, because there's so many people, cameras, and the ability to disseminate information that the likelihood that the bullshit sticks is it's becoming less and less likely as time moves on. And like I said, it harms their credibility inevitably. Much bigger things will harm their credibility, but these are, the things that they don't need to be lied about, but they are lied about, and then they have to go and do a bit of a retraction. And again, it chips into the credibility. It's not just one thing. It's a series of this, that, and the other that over time has, and it's not, it will, or it might. It has corroded public faith, and we're not just talking about the president of France. We're talking about just Western democracies, really. And that's where I kind of bring this episode to this week, is the why of conspiracy theories. And this leans directly into my PhD research, particularly one chapter 6 that focused predominantly on conspiracy theories during the 2010s, those related to uh, certain social phenomena. But I did explore the why of conspiratorial belief in some detail. And lo and behold, there's no real one explanation as to why someone would indulge themselves in conspiracy theories, but nevertheless, there are plenty of uh, good accounts of why people veer to demonstrously false information, fantastical information, and it becomes a solid worldview for plenty of people. So we're not talking about believing, just a basic lie or maybe even government propaganda or what have you. We're talking about out and out conspiratorial notions here. So this short session, this short recorded, this short podcast this week is to explore that, and maybe why some of the reasons why we are seeing an increase in the credulity of false information and how that is harming the traditional hierarchy of credibility. So there's a few ways that we could approach this. There's certainly a number of ways that I did in my PhD research. For example, I argue that elite engineered moral panic, the ambitions of political and media elites, and we could wrap in corporations as well if we wanted, and a few other elite entities, but their purposeful desires to create mass panic, the elite engineered moral panic, to distract people from X, Y, and Z. Pick your issue that certain elite entities do not want public attention to be preyed upon. As maybe one example as to why elite engineered moral panics would be useful. But in the era of social media, well, actually prior to the era of social media, where we only had newspapers, or we had just, a couple of TV news broadcasts a day, maybe, lunchtime news, dinner time news, 10 o'clock, things like that. And it was quite one way. The information was quite one way. It was directed to you. It wasn't like the social media era now, where it's a lot more interactive. It's a lot more engaging. It was quite one way. So the narrative could be controlled, was controlled a lot more rigidly than it is today. And because of the introduction of social media, for younger audience members, it's something that you've grew up with. For audience members my age maybe and above, you very much remember a time before and a time, well, you obviously remember now, but you remember the time before social media and how you would have gained information and how you would have made sense of the environment around you and the things that were going on in the world. And largely that sense-making process was it was a top-down process. This so-called kind of hierarchy of credibility. In a social structure that we live in, we would theoretically expect to believe the information from those at the top, your politicians, your media, your police institutions or your security institutions, so on and so forth, teachers and religious institutions, all of those. You would expect to believe what they say over what some fella in the bar on a Friday night would tell you to the contrary of what they would say. So there's levels of credibility here. Expertise and what have you will obviously gain you higher credibility. So there was that kind of traditional hierarchy of credibility. And in the social media era, that's fractured, to say the least. That it's a key fundamental argument of my own research. So the social media era has given you, the ability to critique these institutions, these entities that once held narrative hegemony. They created the narrative, they directed the narrative, and that narrative made sense of the world for everybody else. So if something had happened internationally or even nationally, it doesn't really matter. The primary sources of information, your politicians, for example, or the police, would have relayed that information to media. Media then would digest and edit that information and then disseminate it to you through news broadcasts or newspapers, likes. But in the era of social media, newspapers are pretty much dead now, really. I don't think there's really any profitability in newspapers from the last reports I looked. They're pretty much aimed at the older demographics. Newspapers aren't aimed at the headlines and the content within. They're not aimed at 18, 19-year-olds, because no 18, 19-year-old buys newspapers. They know this. It's aimed at the older generations. So with those older generations, newspapers will probably cease to be a thing. And because younger generations, and not just the youngest of generations, but younger than maybe the boomer age, shall we say? Let's be stereotypical for a minute. Are much more inclined, and we know this through many studies, get their news, get their information, shape their worldview via social media. That's taken that hegemony, that ability for the elites in the hierarchy of credibility to dictate the narrative like they once did, because the information sources are so diverse now, and they're not as controlled, anywhere near as controlled as what they once were, because the likes of Facebook, Twitter, X, whatever it's called now, YouTube, all of them, Instagram, give platform to content creators. So we know this, and through that content creation comes a diverse ability for us to gather information from a whole bunch of news sources. But with that, though, and because of the kind of unchecked environment that has been created, comes through a lot of false information. And at the most extreme end, I argue, is conspiracy theories. And for me, conspiracy theories are that extreme end of disinformation, but they're also a symptom of societal disenchantment, shall we say, with the elites of the mainstream. It's a show that the populace is quite unhappy, quite distrustful. Is distrustful a word? I'm going to say it's a word. They do not trust, or at least they do not trust to the extent that they should, those in charge. And they seek leadership, guidance. They seek an alternative sense-making source of information elsewhere, from the corners of social media, through the platforms that we can all access. So conspiracy theories, not to be confused with fake news and, a few other times misinformation, disinformation, and what have you. Conspiracy theories, and I'm going to go academic for a moment, indulge me for a moment, but conspiracy theories, just to take but one definition, are the conviction that a group of actors meets in secret to attain some malevolent goal. So it's this notion that it is elites or governments that are trying to conduct shady operations to maybe target certain demographics, certain members of the general population. There's an emphasis on secrecy, cover-ups, and abuse of power. And conspiracy theories, and we saw this, COVID was an absolute exhibition in this. Conspiracy theories, they function as tools for sense-making in chaotic times. And it doesn't need to be we know this, a pandemic. It doesn't need to be to that scale. For example, just social upheaval, social unrest or unease, tensions, frictions in society will be enough for a rise in conspiracy theories. For the one that when I was starting my PhD research, some near 10 years ago, one of the conspiracy theories that kind of emerged at that time, or a consequence of a conspiracy theory that was emerging and cultivating and fermenting at that time, was Pizzagate. So we're going back some 9 years now for the Pizzagate incident. And just to get us caught up, let's swap over to a short video, because I could babble, but why babble when we can just watch a little something to refresh the minds on this, because it is, in its own way, quite comical.
Comet Pizza, a popular Washington, D.C. neighborhood restaurant, unwittingly at the center of a deeply troubling internet storm.
Last weekend, as people were dining inside here, a 28-year-old man turned up armed with an assault rifle to, as he put it, self-investigate what police have called a fictitious online conspiracy theory.
The man fired a shot inside the restaurant. No one was hurt, but this became an alarming consequence of a growing online phenomena: fake news.
So I think we're definitely onto something here with this Pizzagate investigation.
This stemmed from a bizarre and completely false article claiming that Hillary Clinton was running a child sex ring out of the pizzeria. One of the more high-profile figures fanning the flames of the spurious story was Michael G. Flynn, the son of retired General Michael T. Flynn, who President-elect Donald Trump has tapped to be his national security advisor. After the attack, Flynn Jr. tweeted that the story had not been proved untrue. Following this tweet, he's no longer working for Trump's transition team. But the president-elect's war on the establishment has created a climate for such theories that could come back to haunt him.
He has loosed onto the scene an openness to volatile and exotic ideas. And it will be interesting to see how he tries to rein that in when he needs people to believe him.
Other businesses, like the Politics and Prose bookstore on the same block as Comet Pizza, have been tied to the false report. Staff here have been receiving threatening phone calls.
They came from untraceable numbers, and people just sort of talking about saying, they knew what was going on and they were going to come and they were going to do terrible things. Sort of making these coming up with these wild theories about underground tunnels linking our businesses, and much, much worse.
All of the affected businesses have been comforted by the solidarity shown by their customers. But after Sunday's shooting incident, they're now watching more closely who comes through their doors. The area now has police protection. As long as these lies, dressed as fact, can be disseminated freely on the internet, there's an unsettling sense that this could happen again, with more devastating consequences. Amanda.
So, I mean, it's comical in the sense that no one got hurt. And it's comical, again, in the sense that this fellow went into a pizzeria demanding that all the kids in the basement be set free, and the pizzeria didn't have a fucking basement. It's where we're at. This is 2016. We've only gotten worse since. But look, the conspiracy theories, then, generally speaking, are elites acting against the better interests of the rest of us, really. Not to be confused with fake news, because fake news, again, to get a little bit academic for a definition, fake news is fabricated information that mimics news media content in form, but not in organizational process or intent. And it is deliberately misleading content presented as news. We've got a couple of other terms that, if you were to read more into conspiracy theories and what have you, you come across in terms of misinformation and disinformation. Disinformation is the spread or the dissemination of information to deliberately deceive, whereas misinformation is pretty much the spread of information that isn't true, but you're not really intending to deceive anybody. You're just basically passing on information that you yourself thinks to be true. So there's a bit of definitional understandings to be had there, but not overly important right now. But there is plenty of reasons, academically speaking, again, why people may believe in conspiracy theories. And there's more than one theory, because there's no definitive answer here. In the social sciences, interestingly but frustratingly enough, there's never really one answer. We normally have multiple theories. So whenever you see someone present a theory as facts, that's a bit of an oxymoron. But the psychological reasons, I mean, we've got epistemic needs as a rationale. For example, the world for a lot of people feels uncertain, and conspiracy theories provide explanations. That's been supported by a couple of research projects. There's also existential needs that people have, where they have this want to feel control in their lives, a sense of belonging and reassurance, especially in times of social unrest or what feels like chaos. There's also a need for social identity amongst people, and this is where people might join online through social media, particularly online conspiratorial communities, for that sense of belonging. So look, there's a range of psychological reasons as to why conspiracy theories are gaining ground, and you can see maybe how that is being amplified, fermented in the social media era, because of the uncertainties that we face, and growing uncertainties over the last number of years in particular. And people wanting to feel control in those particular scenarios. What better way to do that than to seek out communities, like-minded people, or people who seemingly know the answers. There's also sociological reasons that wrap themselves in and amongst political rationales as well. For example, and this is probably where I would lean into most, I think the psychological reasons do have some weight. To an extent, particularly on an individual level, maybe more so than a group level, but certainly not absent of group considerations or group explanations. But the sociological and political reasons are, for me, and this was and became a key focus within my PhD research, where there was a loss of institutional trust because of the ability in the era of social media for the public to see through elite bullshit. We can see a lot more of the scandals. We can see a lot more of the lies. We can see, we have the ability, rather, to test and measure their claims, to test the validity of them better than at any other point in human history. So because of that, and because of the self-destruction of their own credibility, there has been a measurable lack of institutional trust. Even the OECD reports that, public trust has fell, in certain years. In 2019, trust was measured to have fallen 15% from the year before. There's been other reports, more recent, that have shown that, support's fallen in areas, or, all these reports vary depending on what their focus actually is. But generally speaking, percentage point wise, trust in political institutions, let's say, fallen as much as 40 to 50%. It's a massive nosedive, and it's indicative of what we've been kind of walked into over the last 2 to 3 decades. Coupled with that is a backlash, a growing populist backlash against globalization and the powerlessness, or at least the sense of powerlessness that has created. Because in an era of aggressive capitalism, married with globalization, what was an industrial country like the United Kingdom has seen, say, a lot of, let's say, traditional jobs, mining and textiles and more your general industrial sort of industries, up sticks and piss off to other areas of the planet. Or with technological changes, made people redundant, or what was more of a laborious job is now largely done through automated machinery. So we're seeing globalization and the advancements of tech create powerlessness and also have knock-on effects to the economy in terms of stagnating wages and, well, yeah, just general job losses and what have you. And this gives rise to social unease, social tensions, and a lack then of distrust in political elites to be able to do the job that they're perceived to the job that they're meant to do, which is to maintain the health and the prosperity of you. So if there's an absence of that, then people start to lose faith, and you couple that with scandals that we've seen down through the years, plenty of them, phone hacking scandals, expense scandals, lies around manifestos just to get voted into government. You could accuse current government of that, certainly. Lies around COVID, PP contracts that were dealt out. We could go on all day. But either way, this has led to a lack of institutional trust and backlash against globalization. And this has been amplified by social media. If you're not aware of how algorithms work, I'm not going to teach you, not certainly this evening, but they have had a massive impact on the psychology of the civic population, because they are weaponized. It's a weaponized form of content targeting, whether you're aware of that or not. And what once started as something of a business tool has now become a political weapon online. One only really needs to go and look at the revelations that came out along with the Cambridge Analytical scandal, and that is not even that's not even scraping the iceberg. To start to begin to understand the manipulation that we're all under whenever we take our phones out of our pocket and open up any social media app, or go onto our laptops and go on to social media platforms. The manipulation begins immediately. And if you're unaware of it, then I would advise becoming a little bit more aware of it, because it will help you to understand why you see the content that you see and why other people perhaps don't see it, or maybe even do see it. But understanding the algorithmic process would be for your mental health more than anything else. It would be beneficial for that. And it's that algorithmic weaponization that's given rise to, coupled with the backlash to globalization and the lack of institutional trust that we've seen nosedive over the last few years, given rise then to populist figures, people who would ordinarily, in the pre-social media age, be confined to the fringes of society. They would be voices that would occasionally be heard, definitely not taken seriously by the mainstream. They would not be able to wedge themselves into mainstream discourse, but now they find themselves in seats of elected power, such as your Donald Trumps, and I will put in your Boris Johnsons, Nigel Farage, if we believe polls, which I would take a big handful of salt and throw it against it. But if we go off certain polls, if you certainly go off the gains made at the last local elections, Reform and Nigel Farage, a figure that should be on the fringes, very much gaining a lot of limelight, helped by mainstream media. Conspiracy theorists and misogynists like Andrew Tate, Alex Jones, who owes, what was it, 1.3 billion to Sandy Hook families? Something like that. We'll stick with 1.3. I might be wrong on the figure, but either way, the man owes a hefty chunk of dough. And conspiracy theories like QAnon have all thrived in the online mediums and in online environments. So all in, this is damaging to democracy. It is damaging to the society that a lot of maybe I'm being too unkind here, but we'll go. I'll go with populists, and certainly those on Twitter, the Twitter sphere at the moment. it's damaging to the things that they apparently want: a functional democracy, a fair democracy, and a fair society. But this disinformation, this most extreme form of disinformation via conspiracy theories, which has been cultivated by our elites in the mainstream, in that traditional hierarchy, has now given way to what I term as being an alternative hierarchy of credibility. So because the mainstream political and media and to an extent as well the security elites have done such a piss poor job at keeping our public trust, or keeping our trust as a civic population, people, whether they want to admit it or not, people want leadership. People want to. There's very few of us, I think, that are true leaders amongst the population. I think the vast majority, would rather be, again, whether they like to admit it or not, or whether they actually know it or not, would rather be followers. Being a leader is a lot of work. And if you don't believe those who are in elected political positions and what have you, then you're going to go elsewhere. Again, I've mentioned this point earlier. You're going to go elsewhere. And elsewhere can, just because there is a lot of legitimate flack to be thrown in the direction of the mainstream elites, your alternative, when found, it doesn't mean that they're going to be much better. And that brings us to maybe my reinterest. Reinterest a word? I'm struggling with words this evening. But my reinterest, I'm going to stick with it anyway, in conspiracy theories as I begin to write for publication. And there's some stories that have come up recently that just remind me how batshit crazy things have gotten. And I kind of prophesized we were heading this direction some 10 years ago. And I'm sorry to say, but we are very much going in the direction that I felt that we were going in then. And I can't see how we're going to roll back from it. But it brings me to this character, though.
Looking at your April 10th comment when you were inside the cabinet meeting, you said by September we will know what has caused the autism epidemic and we'll be able to eliminate those exposures.
We'll have some of the information. To get the most solid information, it will probably take us another 6 months.
Okay, so parents should not expect to know what causes autism by September.
We'll see. We're going to, as I said, we're going to replicate some of the studies that have already been done that look like sound studies. And we'll know a lot from those, and then we'll know a lot more afterward.
But not the definitive answer by September.
Just to be clear, it depends what those replicable studies show.
Okay, and then what do you expect to happen 6 months after that? You mentioned something else.
I expect we will know the answers of the etiology of autism.
Okay, so that timeline is moving from September to 6 months after
As I said,
September.
we're going to begin to have a lot of information by September. We're not going to stop the studies in September. We're going to be definitive, and the more definitive you are, the more it drives public policy.
Okay, so that would put us at, what, March next year? You say you'll know the cause of it?
As I said, it's about 6 months after September. A lot of these studies will begin coming back.
I don't know about you, but I wouldn't trust that fucker with a spud gun. So basically what he's saying is that they are going to, at least in part, go through a lot of studies that prove that vaccines work to try and prove that vaccines don't work. And I would not, for a fucking minute, trust the people that he's put on that job to come back with fair results. So what they're actually trying to do, in a way, it's kind of clever. It's to try and dismantle the source of what makes vaccines credible, is the scientific research that's gone into saying, actually, you know what, these are for the benefit of society. So what he's trying to do is to take that narrative at its knees, discredit it, and try then to, at the same time, give credibility to his own narrative. A little bit of a side story, but this is where we're at. Because this was the reason why we get people like RFK and Poor in the United States is because the governments and the administrations in the West that have come before him have been awful. They have been awful over the last 2, 3, 4 decades. They have been shit poor at what they were meant to do. So in has come conspiracy theories, in comes populist rhetoric and populist figures. Because of this erosion of public trust in institutions, where politicians, media, scientists, they have become, even academics like myself, have become targets of suspicion. And it's been fuel for extremism, and at the worst end, mass or at least examples of extreme violence. For example, the Capitol riots, whenever the election got stole from orange tits in the United States, fueled in part as well by that QAnon conspiracy theory, which originated and was cultivated entirely almost online. And we've seen public threats to public officials. We've seen in the United Kingdom the murder of two public officials, one Labour, one Conservative, over the last few years as well, fueled in part by people who have gone down the rabbit hole. And there's plenty of research. Again, I note this, that a belief in conspiracy theories means that, or has found that, individuals who are conspiratorial led are more likely then to be able to justify to themselves the commission of violence or other forms of criminality, because they are staunch in their beliefs, and because they are staunch in those beliefs, conspiratorial beliefs, we go back again to the definition, is where elites apparently in some way, shape or form are trying to harm everybody else. And because there is that belief, it justifies then, kind of like a self-defense mechanism, really, that comes into play in a bit of a warped sense. So it's for the greater good, shall we say, the instigation of violence or other forms of criminality. So look, all round, conspiracy theories have the corrosive effect on social cohesion, because it fuels this us versus them. And you don't need to spend any more than 5 minutes on Twitter, X, whatever it's called, to realize just how much of a racist conspiratorial cesspit that platform has become. It is wall-to-wall bullshit. Anybody with any sort of credibility has fucked off and left X and went elsewhere, because it is not an environment now for truth-telling, despite what they a lot of prominent members on there like to claim that they actually do. Which is actually quite funny, because X has implemented Grok, their own AI system now, they've embedded it into X. So in real time, if someone tweets something and someone responds, they can respond by asking Grok to fact check, which is actually really useful. To give X some credit, it's been really, really useful. Their AI tech can fact check tweets under the tweet that has been made. So if I went on and said the sky was blue, I don't know, John125 can comment underneath saying, Grok, is this true? And Grok will give a detailed answer, either proving or disproving that fact. So basically, the bullshit can be fact-checked by people who are bothered and minded to do so. And it's a good initiative, actually. But it's quite funny to see in the comments, the bullshit being called out. But I know that it's going to change little minds of the people who are hardened to conspiratorial theories. But in a way, I blame people who have fallen down the rabbit hole for allowing themselves to do so, because we have all these tools now to go out and better or intellect or understanding of the world. At times, yeah, we're going to get duped by what looks like credible information, but I think if we're kind of honest to ourselves, and we eventually find out that a source of information or belief that we hold is utter bullshit, in the face of credible information, we should be able to change our minds. We're often wrong about many things. It's often healthy then to admit that, correct yourself, move on. But there's an inability from a lot of people to be able to do that. And this is where it becomes highly politicized and highly kind of cult-like, where it doesn't matter what information comes out to discredit populist figures, for example. The following is strong for them. I mean, you can show the likes of Andrew Tate and his brother for exactly what they are to their followers, to the legion, to the tater tots, and it won't make the slightest bit of difference, because there's always, once, if you're believing in bullshit, then there's always more bullshit to be made up and digested to counteract the actual facts of a certain person or a certain scenario. So look, I blame individuals themselves to an extent, but really, to bring this back to my kind of own PhD research, the book begins with society's elites. The book begins with mainstream society, political actors, media in particular. Those two institutions in particular have a lot to answer for. They created a narrative, particularly around, say, immigration, that was useful for them in the during the 2000s. And by the 2010s, certainly in Britain, they lost that narrative to the populists, at that time, the likes of UKIP, which led to Brexit, which led to the first, that I can think of, and this has been noted by other commentators, the first example of a country voting to impose economic sanctions on itself. That's the potency of, that's the end result of bullshit at the extreme end. Conspiracy theories and disinformation and fake news at the most extreme end, digested and then regurgitated by people en masse. And there's the individual cost as well. And this, I suppose, is the story that kind of, where the RFK stuff, where, the second Trump administration's really kind of captivated by intrigue in conspiracy theories again, it was this story that really kind of made that click again, that I really want to get my head stuck into trying to understand conspiracy theories, theorists, and, the followers a hell of a lot more once again. Because this particular story it's just fucking tragic, really, to be honest with you. And yeah, I can't get myself into the mindset of these people. I really want to, not to believe what they believe, of course, but I really want to get into the mindset of them, to believe how they can be okay with something like this happening, because these people are.
Tomorrow, the Department of State Health Services will release updated numbers on the measles outbreak in Texas. So far, one child has died from measles here in Texas, and now we are hearing from her parents. Teresa Woodard joins us with their comments about the MMR vaccine. Teresa.
Yeah, Cynthia, the parents said their daughter Kaylee was 6 years old when she died on February 26th. The organization that interviewed them and posted that interview online is extremely anti-vaccine. And the parents still are too.
Her fever didn't want to go away.
The interview with this mother and father began in English, but at times switched to German with a translator. They are part of the Mennonite community in West Texas, identified by the state as the center of a measles outbreak that's infected more than 300 people since January. Their 6-year-old daughter developed pneumonia, a side effect of measles. She was the first death recorded from measles in the U.S. in a decade. She was unvaccinated.
She says they would still say, don't do the shots. There's doctors that can help with measles. They're not as bad as they're making it out to be.
The nonprofit Children's Health Defense conducted the interview. Robert F. Kennedy founded this organization in 2007. He's now the Secretary of Health. CHD is strongly anti-vaccine.
The measles vaccine is unequivocally safe and effective. Misinformation and disinformation cost us lives.
Public health experts say the erosion of trust in the MMR vaccine means a once eliminated disease is once again a threat, and preventable deaths.
He says God does no wrong.
Yes, absolutely. We would absolutely not take the MMR. Like, the measles wasn't that bad.
Are being prevented no more. In Dallas, I'm Teresa Woodard.
So look, that's the kind of potency of it. That's, I mean, I don't think I want to go into too much of a sort of slagging off of the couple that we just saw on the video. But I think it's fair to say that it's difficult to understand how they can, well, one, how they could take that position anyway, and then two, how they can maintain that position, I think is incredibly difficult to try and understand. And it's certainly outside the realms of what I have in my toolkit at the moment. But look, you know, for everybody else that is mindful, is receptive of new information, I mean, there's plenty of ways that you can just fact check. AI now is an open tool on the market. If you're not aware of how to use it, use it. It's not always 100% accurate, but it can be a hell of a lot of the time. Free versions that you can use. That's probably the most simplistic thing at the minute in terms of just getting a quick answer to something. But there's all, you know, we've had fact checkers in the mix now for quite some time. You know, like Full Fact, for example. You know, simply, you know, if it sounds like bullshit, just have a wee Google into it. It might take you a wee bit of, you know, it might push past 10 minutes for you at some stage, and you'll be better off for it. You know, the Great Reset conspiracy theory is another racially charged notion that I'm not going to go into in any detail. If you're not aware of it, just read a little bit more into it and just realize it for the nonsense that it actually is. But I mean, it's been played down and debunked time and time again, and it's institutions like Full Fact. Snoops is another, that, you know, there's plenty of all the BBC and Channel 4 and what have you. They've all got fact checkers to help recalibrate and to make factual sense of the world around you, rather than believing some fucker with a Wi-Fi connection and a blog somewhere in fucking Latvia. You know, so it takes a little bit of initiative from us to be able to get a better scope of what's what. But it would be for your benefit to do so. But look, that's kind of where I'm going to leave it, actually, for this evening, for this week. I mean, I suppose there's a couple of questions, maybe, if you're watching this at a later time, to answer perhaps in the comments. Do we think that's where we are now? Do we think that we can get back to a position where we are able to trust the elites in society, those politicians, those media outlets at the top of that hierarchy of credibility? Can we ever get back into a position where we can say, yeah, actually, you know what, I do trust them, and I do think that they've got our best interests at heart? Do we think we could get to that, a place like that? It seems like quite a utopian vision at this point, and if anybody knows the definition of utopia, well, it pretty much means a fucking fantasy land. Something that's not real, a fairy tale place. But look, do we think we could ever get back to that? And have you ever held a conspiratorial belief, you know, or something that you know actually is a conspiracy theory, but you still believe it anyway, or you kind of hope that it's real? You know, I don't know. Bigfoot or some bollocks like that, because it is bollocks. Well, if it's conspiracy theory, it's code word for bollocks. But is there anything that you would hope to be real, or anything that you have believed in the past that's just turned out to be complete nonsense? Do comment. Do let me know, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And that's it for this week. I will be posting reels as the week goes on, and hopefully other bits of criminologically steeped trivia and infographics and what have you across my various channels as the week goes on. If you need, or if you want to contact me directly, absolutely feel free to DM me. I will get back to you, like the comments, as soon as I possibly can. For another week, I will see you soon.